All right, you're welcome back to JoyNews Prime. It's time for business, and I've been joined in the studio by Sandra Apen, who will be bringing us business news, and also Philip Namfuri, also of Joy Business. But before they come in with their submissions and all that they have to say, I wanted to go to our Facebook page where we've put up the question. The government says that it has put 12.2 billion cedis in. Directly or indirectly into the pockets of many Ghanaians since 2017. So I'm asking, how much of it has ended up in your pocket? And already we have some comments there. If we can just scroll down to that. Ilyasu says, fictitious figures. So where's the data to back this up? Gabriel says, Momo mind first before I report to you. Okay, I'm not the one giving out the money. Boniface says, a common song of every government. This money never reaches our pockets. Lasky says, this government is not serious. Talk is cheap. Isaac says, maybe those in another planet. So you can get onto our Facebook page and let us know if you have been a beneficiary. Of course, government says that it is direct, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. Indirectly, meaning that if you're a beneficiary of free SHS or your ward is a beneficiary of free SHS, money has come into your pocket. Now let's come back to the studio. And Sandra.
Hi, Joe. Busy day for
hello,
Philip
Sandra.
Namfuri.
And yourself. A busy day for all of us when the budget is presented. So I would first want to come to you. How much of the 12.2 billion CDs has come?
I was trying to turn out my pocket.
Unfortunately, I don't have a pocket. So.
I can't find anything in my pocket. So
yours is in your purse. Okay, so you carry on with business. You tell us what's coming up.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sandra Esinam Apen. As always, I'm here for business. So the 2020 budget has been done and dust, but the particles of the dust are littered all over the economy. But from the budget presentation, the finance minister actually was clear about the significant impact of the banking sector crisis on the economy. And he said the reforms have actually resulted in more resilient sector, well positioned to support economic growth. The big question is, has confidence actually been restored in the economy? But let's listen to that soundbite. When we come back, Philip Namfuri will be doing the justification. So we don't have that sound yet. So Philip, first of all,
okay.
You've listened to the finance minister today. My candid opinion, just harmless question, not to read political meanings. Must the opposition or the party in power always remind us of what the opposition didn't do in the past?
I believe when we are monitoring the economy, the politicians always infuse their own tendencies or proclivities, if I can call that, into the budgets. And there's always the use of the phrase political economy. So you can't have the economy sitting on this zone without political influence. It's a given. So I always sit back and allow them to do what they want to do. But I'll take the numbers and I'll juxtapose them to the reality, and I'll see if indeed things are well and good. When the finance minister was presenting that part about the banking sector, he made mention about how assets had increased and the banking sector profits had picked up. Let me subject that to some analysis first before we continue our discussion. So I was going through the assets over a 2-year period, and I realized that what is actually causing this increase in the assets, because at the time the banking sector, before it went down, there were 36 banks in the economy. We've come down to 23. So one will ask, okay, so these assets should dwindle. I looked at the foreign assets of banks, and foreign assets, we look at foreign currency, etc. Assets simply of banks are the things they're using to make money for themselves. It went up over the 2-year period by 2 billion. Domestic assets went up from 78 billion to 105 billion. Let's keep that in mind. Securities, bonds, bills, etc. What government puts, I beg your pardon, what the banks put their money into now more than lending, went up from 7 billion to 30 billion. Now, advances, the loans they give out, and it's net. So what is going about minus what is coming in, went up from 8 to 11 billion. So you realize that the growth in there is coming from the bank's allocation to securities. And we've had this discussion before, where they are moving away from lending to securities because of the risks associated with lending. So if you look at the growth in assets, it's primarily coming from the move they had from lending to securities. And by securities, we're talking about long-term government bonds, etc. So what it simply means is that banks are now putting more of their money, instead of doing the lending that we should see to stimulate the economy, They are avoiding the risks, and they are going into securities, which
is that in any
virtually
way going to help the economy? Because if you want to lend to people, obviously, we've spoken about the lending rate. Could it be the reason why a lot of people are also not going for loans and other facilities? Okay, so
the rates on loans reflect the price that the bank is going to give you for that. Infused in that price are a number of elements which the banks use to decide that, okay, I want to give Israeli 17%. Once upon a time, they were using a base rate model. Bank of Ghana realized that it was a defective model, and they brought one that should bring some standardization.
The policy rate.
The Ghana reference rate, which includes the policy rate as a measure, so that they can do their own lending and add a risk premium to it. Now, when they look at that, other things are mitigating against bringing interest rates down. That Ghana reference rate is at 16%. So if a bank adds, let's say, 3, 4, 5%, you should be lending around 20, 21, 22. But it's not possible.
Right.
But it's not possible because of the other factors we need to add to the cost of the loans, like the non-performing loans. So you realize that, yes, it will not help the economy. And back to your question, the lending, we have to look at banks. They are profit-making entities. They must give value to their shareholders. And they must make sure that when you and I walk into the bank for our deposits, they haven't put it into risky ventures. So they have to weigh that against also making profits or maximizing their shareholders' value.
That is debatable because the banking sector crisis has taught us a lot of lessons as to whether the banks actually utilized our monies well, whether they went into risky ventures or not. It's another topic for another day. But
when the finance minister talks about the fact that the millions of depositors' funds were saved because of what they did, I'm sitting back and I'm asking if I'm somebody who almost got my fingers burnt, or really, in fact, there are millions of people who have been affected, who are unlikely to get that money back. Why would I be confident in the system?
Very good one. So that's where it goes back to the factors of financial development. And I was talking to Sandra about this earlier on in the week. Financial depth measures the size of the financial sector, so either banking, pensions, etc. Then we have financial efficiency, how well they are doing their business of intermediating. That's bridging the gap between savers and then those who have the deficit units. Then the financial inclusion also comes to play. But all these things must sit on two key things, and I put it down on paper so that I'll be very specific. Legal traditions, our regulatory framework when it comes to dealing with banking sector issues. So if somebody defaults on a loan and you go to court, have you seen how lengthy the court processes are?
Yes.
It doesn't inspire confidence. So next time you ask yourself that, will I really go and put my money in the bank? Will I really go and take a loan? Another thing is the quality of institutions, and this has come up so many times. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I think Evan Spencer was hosting the Securities and Exchange Commission Deputy Director General, and together with the Securities Industry Association head, and they were mentioning the staff numbers of the SEC. I think it was about 65. I stand to be corrected.
Is that enough?
It's woefully inadequate to cater for a sector that has so many fund management.
Yeah, but then if you have this limited number of staff, why then would you license
so many companies, you know?
So it all goes back to the quality of the institutions, those who were running it at that time. You see, sometimes it may sound easy to say, oh yeah, you should have done this, but I always try and put myself in their shoes. I'm not trying to defend anybody, but try and put yourself in their shoes. At the same time, I think some of them didn't put their foot on the ground, or didn't put their foot in the ground. Look at what happened with the banking sector. Licenses were being churned out left, right, center, and we've all learned about the complicit activities of some of the people involved in the Bank of Ghana. So the institutions that are regulating the financial sector have a key role to play in the confidence.
Right.
Now, the harm has already been done. The key issue is how should people and how quickly can people be made whole again with their monies? If this process is very tardy and it's slow, that will go again to affect the confidence of people.
No, back to Israel's question. I have spoken to you during the week, and I asked whether you ever invest in Ghana, and your response is you're not too sure.
I'm not too sure.
I personally will not do that. I've spoken to a number of Ghanaians who had their funds locked up in various institutions and throughout this financial sector cleanup. And what they tell me is that they are not going to ever invest again. We played a story 2 days ago, and pensioners were also saying that we don't know where to take our money to now. So when the finance minister comes and he tells us confidence has been restored in the financial sector, what are we using to measure it? Because people are moving away from investing into securities, also doing in deposits. So what are we using to actually measure this confidence that we are being told that is rising?
Sandra, the measures of confidence is not one metric.
Okay.
It will have to be several metrics, which we'll have to look at over time. But over the 2-year period, if you look at the banking sector alone, you realize that the numbers are going up. But my question always is, where are the numbers coming from? Look at the issue where banks are turning their money to investments rather than to lending. Obviously, they don't want the risks, but the banks are on their own. What about the insurance companies? I was looking at the NIC's annual report. The number of complaints against insurance companies has gone up a lot between 2017 and 2018. Why are people complaining? Because insurance companies couldn't pay claims. Why couldn't they pay claims? Because they themselves had put their money into financial institutions such as banks, which went down. So you
which
see that,
is quite interesting.
You see, it goes round and round and round. That's why I'm saying that if the finance minister is saying something, that's fine. But the institutions that are mandated to regulate should ensure that people are made whole first and foremost, or everybody involved in making sure that people have access to their funds are made whole. That should be one step. Beyond that, we should try not to come back to the situation where we have all our financial sector players going down, having problems, having issues, etc. It's a very multifaceted discussion. And
I wish you could get some true answers to it. So, but that brings us to government expenditure. We are asking for an extra 15 billion Ghana cedis. What is the justification for this extra money?
Well, let me start with context. So we had 74 billion budgeted last year, in fact this year, 2019 budget. So the next one, we are going up by 15 billion. We've projected more revenue than we can actually raise. Over the course of financial years, we've struggled to raise revenue. What's the justification for this? A lot of expenditures are in the budget, critical expenditures. The wages we're going to pay, the interest payments, and the statutory payments also, the get funds, etc. I heard the minority, how do I refer to him? Kesa Atuforsen. He was talking about
the former.
Yes, the former deputy finance minister. Thank you. Talking about how capital expenditure had dipped over the course of this budget, what we're coming to 2019 to 2020, and many arguments. They will have to do a lot to raise the revenue. And as to how they're going to do it right now, my little brain is struggling to adjust to it and find out how exactly it's going to happen. But 15 billion is quite a high number. But I look at it and I see that we are still within the fiscal deficit cap we set for ourselves. I think we should try hard and stay within it. But in there, you know, there are a lot of promises they implemented 2017. They need to fulfill them.
Okay.
Together with their other regular expenditures. So all these things should come to play to feed into this 15 billion. My mind just went to something. I didn't, and I may be wrong, I didn't hear, normally in the budget we hear the benchmark value they place on petroleum, on our oil exports. So how much we are looking to gain from a barrel of oil.
Yeah.
I didn't hear it in this budget. So looking at the numbers on, and that's just the budget speech. I know we have access to the budget statement itself. I haven't gone through it, but I think the speech should have contained some indication on how much we'll be looking at gaining from petroleum revenues, rather than the broad strokes we're looking at today and the different things. So the 15 billion is quite high, but still within their fiscal deficit. The test is, can we maintain it as the year 2020 begins?
And we are heading to the elections. Hold it right there. I think, Israel, you have something still on the budget to tell us, and then.
Okay, so for me, I put this question to Dr. Lord Benson when I spoke with him earlier. You know, the typical trader, if you're speaking to the typical trader, they'll tell you, for them, if they have people coming into their shops to buy their goods, they're happy. The economy is booming. And then if you speak to the average Ghanaian, he says, if I have money in my pockets and I can afford the basic necessities of life, for me, that's it. The economy is doing well. And I asked the question, why can't we have an economy as simple as that?
And simplicity means?
No, there are so many areas that come to link.
But that's the bottom line. I mean, everything works so that these people will feel that way.
But you see, where we sit as a developing economy, a lot of factors act against us. Let me just start with one. So they may tout that, and they, meaning government officials, may tout that macro numbers are good. But you have your cedi depreciating, Then most of these people are in a service-based economy, dealing in buying and selling. Some of them importing. When we import, what happens? The prices of these goods and services go up. Most of our goods and services are transported primarily by road transport. What happens when fuel prices go up? It affects the cost of transporting by road. So most of these things come back again to what they refer to as the structural oddities in the economy. And it will take a long time to change. It won't be one budget or two. Change the structure so that we are shielded against certain minute changes, fuel price increases. They've removed the subsidies off, fine. We have a deregulated petroleum pricing model, fine. But on the exchange foreign currency front, what happens to the Ghanaian cedi or the Ghana cedi when other currencies are moving? We also need to bear in mind that we are in a global economy. So the IMF at their recent annual meetings, World Bank IMF annual meetings, we're talking about how the global economy is going to slow down. We saw the effects of a slowdown in the global economy from 2014, 2015 to 2016, where commodity prices slumped so badly on the back of less demand from China. And Ghana, again, major exporter of commodities, and as a result, less money coming in, feeding into it, having to borrow more. So I think it would be good for me to sit down and draw a whole chart about how these things are all linked. But it keeps on going on, and it's all based on a structural issue.
So now we put up an earlier question before we started the conversation here on the business segment, and it had to do with government saying that $12.2 billion, the finance minister said 12.2 billion cedis, has directly or indirectly been put in the pockets of many Ghanaians. And we put up the question, how much of that amount has come into your pocket? And here are some of the comments that we have. Sadat says, Kwekwanansi Stories. Papara says, I was employed under the YE afforestation project for which I am paid 600 cedis. And since then, I've received payment for 14 months, totally 8,400 cedis. At least I chopped some. Bravo, Nanado. So he has some money in his pocket. Fabian says, 0 Ghana cedis. In fact, they are even owing me because of CSE tax, scrapping of extra classes, stopping private extra classes. This is rather taking money out of my pockets. I presume probably maybe a teacher. Amos says, I have 3 siblings enjoying free education, so I'm saving 4,500 cedis per year. All right, so he feels it in his pocket. Haj says, contractors who've won government projects, both on roads and buildings, are paid as and when they raise certificates. This means those they've hired are equally paid, making them direct beneficiaries. Those benefiting from free education have saved some unexpected expenditure. This government has done it all. All right. So there's some people.
Quickly before we end business, you know, the last year's budget, they had a theme that was job creation.
Stronger economy for jobs and prosperity.
Exactly. Did you see more jobs being created?
That would be very hard because, let me just use the US for example. They always come out on a monthly basis with a jobs report. We don't have one here. So measuring jobs.
Government will argue that agriculture for growing,
planting for food and
jobs has created jobs
over a million direct and indirect jobs. I am here to put all the numbers they mentioned today together. But sustainability of those jobs, Israel, Sandra, is the key question here.
We have a lot of issues with NAPCO, but we have to run Israel. That's all for business for the first part. I'll surely be back after 8 p.m. with more business news. Thanks so much, Philip Namfuri and Israel, for making the business segment an interesting one.
Thank you very much, Sandra. So wait.